So these are some of the things that I've been responsible for. Um, an old junkyard find, the Volkswagen, that's 1/24 scale. The Union Pacific locomotive is N scale, and the Southern Pacific is 187 scale. So moving on. Yeah, okay. The mystery barn find. So my whole concept, and it's thinking outside the box. In order to make your layout or any of your projects stand out, you have to think beyond the norm. Everybody does the norm. When I was building model kits, I never once built a model kit the way it was meant to be. I always did my own thing. I would customize. I never ever used the instructions unless there was a part that I couldn't figure out where it went. Then reluctantly, you would take the instruction sheet and try and locate it. So the what if? What if GM back in the 60s or like that, 56 Chevy? What if they made a crew cab with dual wheel axle? That's my interpretation. I always try and do drawings and stuff like that before I actually attack the model. And the other one is a 1929 Ford Model A pickup. Same thing, extended cab. I couldn't get the dual wheels, so I put a very wide slick on the back. So the fenders have to be widened in both cases. I spent a lot of my youth doing this on model cars and trucks, and to the point where I was competing for prizes. So there is the models. Obviously, the older one is not finished yet, but that's what I work on. So all of the techniques that I use in my model railroading, I've brought from my model cars and so on. All the techniques that I've learned, I've brought them forward. And as you can see, they're nice and spotless. Even the cars in the background are spotless because they're show cars. But when I look at magazines like Model Railroader, and this is what got me going on this. This is almost, I've been weathering now for 15 years. So no more than that. Oh, geez, I'm going to date myself. Anyway, you get Model Railroader magazine, and they would have this beautiful scene on the front. The scenery's all nice, the buildings are weathered and everything else, and then this toy-like train going through the middle of it. To me, that's not realistic. So I switched gears and started to build weathered stuff. But as you can see here, this like the bed of that truck. It's made from coffee stir sticks and strips of stainless steel. The police car in the bottom, that's a what if. In Toronto here, we have a highway called the Don Valley Parkway. And it was sort of a legend. They used to have a Corvette that used to cruise, a police Corvette that used to cruise the highway at night looking for speeders. And I never got to see that Corvette, so I don't know whether it actually existed. But in later years, they changed it to a 1970 Camaro. Super Sport, all decked out, the whole bit. I saw that car. So after that, I believed the Corvette. That's my interpretation now. What if it's a Ferrari Mythos going up and down the highway looking for speeders? So the barn find. I want to share the techniques that I've learned, and I try and do it in many different ways. Um, the St. Lawrence divisions had some modeling competition, not competitions, but group builds and so on that I participated in. But this barn find, it's 1/24 scale. I model in HO, but my modeling is all over the place. So the mystery barn find, it's one of those dioramas that takes you down the multiple rabbit holes. And in order to achieve the results, you have to go down the rabbit holes and you have to ask the question, what if? Um, and run it through different processes. So my model railroading is not, um, what do you call it, prototype. I do freelance. And my personal opinion, freelance is harder to do because you have to make it more convincing than prototype. Prototype, you have a building, it's exact or whatever, that's done. Now I have to do stuff to make it look like it was there forever. So I work on everything I can. So in the barn find, I would hazard to guess that some of you people have heard stories about, oh, somebody found this old car or whatever in a barn and it's a like a gold mine. Well, it's been stowed away and forgotten until now. So here it comes. Um, the story that I tried to put into this starts in February '89, but actually started July 3rd, 1985. As we progress in the presentation, you'll see where that is significant, those dates. So I had to build a structure. Now, one of the things that I learned, I used to work at a hobby shop, and my boss was classified as a master modeler. Now, he modeled military, but he also did some model railroad stuff. So I learned from him different techniques as well to add on to into my toolkit. One of the things that he taught me, when you do a diorama, never do it square to the front of the diorama. Always put it on a bit of an angle. Hence, I have it cut off on a bit of an angle. So that angle is the front. So all of this, because I'm working in 1/24 scale, it would have cost me a fortune to have like Tim Morris at uh, have the wood made, or Northwest Lumber, or so on. It would have cost a fortune. So I cut all this on my table saw in the garage. And it's built on corrugated cardboard, believe it or not. You can see the cardboard in the back walls. So now here's a couple of techniques here that you can use. Well, there's one for sure. The guys that do all this building in wood and so on, and they like to do the rivet, not the rivet, the nail holes in the sides and so on. You can also do knots in wood by drilling a hole, and I used a barbecue skewer, same size. You stick it in the hole, you glue it in the hole, cut it off, sand it down nice, and you get the knots in the wood. If you do it on a bit of an angle, you get that oblong shape knot. And then I stained this with hunter line stains. So, like I said, the wood was all cut on my table saw. The stone wall that you see there is a plaster casting. I have a mold that came from Sterling Models to make that mold. And I just love the way that looks, that stonework. So I've used it all over the place. I use it on bridge abutments and so on. But I put it in here, and I put wood on the upper part of the wall on the inside. I glued that on the cardboard. Just little details, small details, like where a block and tackle would fit on that beam. It's worn out from the chain rubbing on it. Then there's planking on the upper floor. I mean, it's probably, and you would probably find that in a barn. It's not thin wood because it's not supported every 24 inches like you would normally have in a house, or 16 inches. It's a board that has to span maybe 10 feet. So it's probably 2.5, 3 inches thick. Just little things. And then we come down to adding more detail. So I had this little, I guess you could call it a knee wall, some to divide a room in the back. Plus, I have a friend of mine does 3D printing, resin printing. So the Coke machine and the crates and the Jack Daniels crates are 3D printed. And I've used on the Jack Daniels crates, you'll see another picture. It's done with what AK weathering pencils. And that drum, the oil drum, necessity, they say necessity is the mother of invention. I could not find anywhere a 1/24 or 1/25 scale drum. So I made it from flat styrene stock. The actual size and diameter is the size of a $2 coin. And that's what I used to cap it. Also to wrap the flat stock around as ribs. I also used a couple of different techniques here on the Coke machine. I painted it a stainless steel color, bright, shiny stainless steel. And then I used Tamiya red paint. And within a half an hour of painting it, if you take a brush dampened with Windex, you can get the paint to come off like it's been worn off, just like you see there. So that's done with Tamiya paint and Windex. And it'll work every time, providing it's not a really rough surface below the substrate. This was nice, clean, resin printed. Even styrene plastic would work. Same thing. The oil drum, painted with Tamiya colors, a coat of matte finish went on it, and then I started working the new AK weathering pencils. Now, this does not mean that it only works in 1/24 scale. I've done, you saw at the first slide, the N scale diesel. You can do anything you want. You just have to put your mind to it and experiment. When you experiment, you have to make sure that you have a prototype photograph to copy from. If you try and do it from your mind, 9 out of 10 times you're going to overdo it. But to each his own. Not everybody likes weathering, so they want things pristine. That's fine too. I love the look of reality, as Bernard said this morning, reality. So here's the 3D printed crates that are, the grain and so on is put in with the weathering pencils. I had a ball doing this with the weathering pencils because it's a new medium for me, and it worked out really well. There's the oil drum, the block and tackle, scratch built, and the chain with a little bit of rust on the wood, the oil stain below the drum, a little bit of sand and dirt in the corners, and it just progresses. It ends up with straw and everything on the floor as well. This is a new technique I discovered. A lot of us are used to using they chip when you chip paint. There's two ways of doing it, I guess. The one way I used to do it was I called it the Chuck Doane method. He sent me the instructions, and I used it until this. And his instructions were: you stain your wood the color you want, then you liberally coat it with mineral spirits, then you paint on your acrylic paint, and as soon as the acrylic paint goes from shiny to a dull, you take some Scotch tape or whatever and you place it on the acrylic paint, and it'll pick off some of the paint. I found this here works better because now I don't get the tape marks, like it took too much off or whatever. So I prepare the door. I weather it with that's all basswood. If you use balsa wood, this is not going to work. I took a card file or a stainless steel brush to brush the bottom of the door to get the wood to look shredded or worn. Also, the card file or the side of a razor saw gives you grain in the wood, since basswood basically you don't see any grain. You can also use the side of a hacksaw. And as you're going down the wood, you twist the blade from side to side so you get different angles, and it changes the direction of the wood grain. Anyway, this here is done with Vaseline, wax paper, and acrylic paint. So you take a piece of wax paper, and I prefer to tape it down so it doesn't fly all over the place. Then you coat it with a good coat of Vaseline, and you make sure that your wood is stained. Then you paint the color, like in the middle slide, it's white chips. So you paint white on the Vaseline. And like anytime you put water on oil, the water beads up. And the paint is going to want to do that. And that's not a bad thing, but if you work at it, you'll get it to spread out more. It will spread out a bit more. And you let it dry. Then you take your boards, and I did the boards individually. You take the boards, and after you've put your stain on it, you seal it with a semi-gloss. You can use a dull coat too, but it works better with a semi-gloss. And then you take some gloss or semi-gloss paint, and you just dab it on randomly, and then take that board and place it down on the Vaseline, the paint on the Vaseline, and leave it there. And you do all the boards. And what I did is I placed the book on top of it afterwards, and I let it sit there for probably about 6 hours. I don't think you have to do that long, but I did it. Once I took it off, that's what I got. And you clean it up with a toothbrush or a wire brush. Now, I also did it a second time with a different color, and that's how I got the blue on top of the white. So there's the finished door, the bottom right-hand corner. The chain is obviously a chain from wherever you can get it to look to scale. The padlock is made from a piece of plastic from a part sprue and a staple to get the shackle on the lock. Small details. The nails that are holding the door together, all I did was drill holes and took some telephone wire and put it in the holes and let them stick out if they wanted to, if they didn't go in properly. I just sort of clipped them kind of short, but let them stick out and then go back with a bit of rust color. So there's your, I didn't have any paint cans either, so I had to make those. And I wasn't sure how my idea was to have a tipped over can of paint. So I took a piece of styrene, flat, I think it was 10 thou plastic styrene, and I cut it the shape of maybe the way the paint would spill. The paintbrush was made from, again, a piece of part sprue with a piece of aluminum tape to create the furrow on the brush, and then the brush is in the paint. Just by doing that, I got to see how it would look. So that piece that's under the can now ends up on top of the Coke machine for good. And up on the shelf, I painted the shelf properly with the tipped over can. The cans were, I can't remember what the diameter plastic was, but I cut them all the same size. I cut the disc to put in the bottom of them and the lid. And telephone wire created the handle. The 3D printed Jack Daniels bottles, and I was able to create some decals for that as well, and for the crate. Now, I have one question for you, and you probably won't be able to answer it. Maybe some of you have already heard this. Do you know why a Jack Daniels bottle is square? I really want to do that. It's way in the back. So I didn't bother. The funnel that's hanging on the wall here is just made from aluminum foil. I had an old radiator in my parts box, so that's sitting on the floor all rusted. When you go shopping, I always save the blister packs, the flat part of the plastic, the clear plastic that things are packaged in, for windows. If I need a window or something, I've lost a window somehow, I have the acetate that I can use. That saw was made from a piece of flat acetate that I did all the circle with all the pie sections to get the number of teeth even. Drew it all out, and then I cut it, and that was the result. Over in the left-hand picture, on the right-hand top corner of the picture, you can't see it very well, but there's a long tree saw, two-man tree saw, that was done the same way with the acetate. The corrugated rusted metal up there is acetate from a cookie package. And when I saw that, I thought, oh my God, that's perfect for corrugated roofing. I had some old car fenders that I put in there, and my little Wally in the bottom, if you can see down in the bottom right-hand corner. So it's all in the details. So here's the barn find. Finally, you get to see what the car is. I spent hours on that car. I did all the detail inside the passenger compartment. I added more detail to make it spot on, prototype. And then, like an idiot, I went and covered it with a tarp. So now you can't see all the detail that I did. I even did more detail on the back. You can see one of the hoses that comes down the side with the compression fittings and so on are different colors. Anyway, the technique here is the tarpaulin. This is what I use also to do covers and tarpaulins on carloads on 187 scale. It's Clininc soaked with white glue, water mix. It's roughly 50-50 mix. You cover the load. What I did first was cover the car in saran wrap because I didn't want the glue to stick to the car. So I can actually take that tarp off and I have a good model. But you drape it over the car after you've done the saran wrap. And of course, I wanted the tarp to be folded over top of the Mr. Juicer thing there, or the whatever they called it, on the back end of the car. So everything was folded it just right, and then I started to put the glue on. And you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, I had these little plastic like clothes pegs to weight it down to make it look more natural. And once it's done, it looks like the real thing. And if you have rope ties that are sort of holding it together, even that helps tie it together and look more realistic. So there's 3 coats of glue over the top of that. And then once I was done, I painted it. And because I worked at the hobby shop, because I was introduced to all the military stuff, all my weathering products basically are related to the military stuff, except for my Bragdon and AIM powders. Now it's Monroe powders. So Wally, that's another thing that was scratch built. And the hockey stick. I'm Canadian. When I grew up, that's the brand of hockey stick that I used, made by our Hespeler Indians, Micmac Indians. If you followed Back to the Future, I think it was the first episode, where they had to get the power from the lightning strike on the clock tower, so they put a trolley rod up in the air to try and catch the power. There's the hook, and it's all in the details, and you can see how big Wally and the hockey stick is based on the pencil that's there in the foreground. The bird's nest, it's 12 millimeter static grass, a little bit more grass in the joints of the beams. We're going to end up real early. So here's the final scene. And again, it's more details. I have Wally with a Star Wars helmet in his hand. The hockey stick is way over on the left edge of the picture. The paint cans. And there's a strange little being on the right-hand side. The car with the painted tarp, the rad, and there's a ring on top of the car that was cut off the top of a prescription bottle where the lip is that holds the lid. And then I've tried to make this so that there's more than 1 or 2 movie or TV themes in this diorama. So if you look at it, you'll see the Star Wars, Wally. What do you call them? And then all the license plates. And the license plates you have on the top there They all are either a movie scene or a TV show. So there you have the 6H96472 was Biff Tannen. He's the one that had the manure truck dump on him with the Mercury convertible. The Cervic Caddyshack. Lin 274, Gone in 60 Seconds. THT 124 is Psycho. And the 534293 is Adam 12. Some people may not remember these, some of them. Smokey and the Bandit, Band 1. Stark 1 is Iron Man. There's actually two of them up there, Stark 1 and Stark 11 and Stark 4. Also Miami Vice, ZAQ 178. So, and if you'll notice up in the corner here, where the nest was, there's 2 eggs in the nest. And I couldn't find something small enough, so I cut the head off a couple of map pins. But this, I love doing this stuff. Everything I do has it just takes me on different tangents. So with all of the stuff that I've done here, you can also see the individual presentation in NMRAX on YouTube, or NMRA, searching under my name. So I have using weathering pencils, chip paint with wax paper Vaseline, weathering wall signs, workbench to mainline is getting started in weathering, and then the salt and hairspray technique. Now, salt and hairspray technique doesn't work all that well as you get into the smaller scales. And I think it works the best down to about O scale. And if you go smaller than that, you really have to work at it. How small can you get small? Grains of salt that are going to stay a grain of salt when you wet them. So that's where it goes. Now, I'm not out of time, but those are the 2 plates.